Up next on the Griot.
But one thing that I had to learn to come across is that I belong in the room. Sometimes I do have to bring my own table and my own chair, and it's just like IKEA where you put it together and you make it work.
Nequella Battle, a chief information officer serving in the public sector in North Carolina. This millennial entrepreneur wants you to take your passion to the polls this November. She's most definitely an American.
Nequella Battle in the house. Welcome, my dear friend, my favorite millennial.
Thank you, Tamara, for having me.
We met when we were working in the public sector together, and I'm like, oh my goodness, she's a chief information officer. And it's interesting to note that in the tech space, women of color only last year, I think this was some recent research, made up about 11%. And that's women of, different ethnicities and races. And then when it came to Black women, we only accounted for 3% in that space. So what is it like being in the tech space and you are a Black woman? How do you navigate situations like that? And what's your advice for others?
So yes, I am in the tech field, but one thing outside of just being a Black woman in the tech field, I am typically the youngest one in the room. As you all know, the tech field is currently a male-dominated field, but not only that, it's a male-dominated field, but particularly to the white males. And if you all know with tech, everyone is comfortable with the white male. That is one thing I will never be. So being in the tech field, I would say at times it is exhausting because I feel that there's a constant battle because I have to deal with the lack of visibility at times. And also when you're in meetings, you have to demand respect because again, it's a male dominated field. So as a Black woman, you don't want to come off as angry or upset or fearful. But one thing that I had to learn to come across is that I belong in the room. Sometimes I do have to bring my own table and my own chair, and it's just like IKEA where you put it together and you make it work.
And you stand on some great shoulders. Remember the movie Hidden Figures? And I think all of us were like, whoa, nobody told us that in, American history class in high school. Katherine Johnson, it was a Black woman that put a man on the moon. Like, imagine what life might have been like for you with an interest in this space with that knowledge many, many years ago. And I love what you say in terms of, feeling confident enough to speak up, even though you may have to sometimes demand that respect in that stage in order to voice your perspective. So, I also talk about how you're one of my favorite millennials. And so I'm glad you mentioned that you're typically the youngest person in the room. And I know I've sat in a few meetings with you where you were the youngest person in the room. What do you feel like, the older generations, my generation, Generation X, and boomers and above, what do you feel like we get wrong about you guys, you millennials?
They think that, oh, well, you just want to do it your way per se. But it's not that we want to do it our way. We just have a different way of getting to goal Z. And I think a lot of times that a lot of people will look at A through C, but for instance, like myself, I am a strategic thinker. So when I think of a project or I think of an end goal, it's never A to C. I think about the things that go beyond A to Z. And what could happen, what are the potential issues that may arise. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we get hit the most with as millennials is that we don't really listen to other opinions, but it's not that we don't listen. We just have our own and a better way of getting to it.
And you are a generation, that first sort of generation that had access to sort of instant technology, so that does make sense. And the other thing that research shows us, and you already know this, we've chatted about this, is that you all are very socially conscious. Like, you won't buy a product unless the company has some sort of corporate social responsibility. And so that's a nice segue into a recent project that you just launched. Tell us about Protest to the Polls.
Yes. So Protest to the Polls is a nonpartisan organization that's focused on voter registration and voter education. And my ultimate goal for it is to get people enthusiastic about voting, because there's a lot of times that people are, oh, my vote doesn't count, or I'm not going to put in the vote because it doesn't impact me or affect me. But in our reality, it does. Because voting across the board, I think that a lot of people pay attention to the political campaigns, especially when it's a large presidential campaign as the 2020 election, but we fail to not recognize the local agencies or the local officials that are in place. And those are the ones that impact you the most because they're your mayors, they're the ones that represent you in the state, they're the ones that represent the rules and the regulations, your taxes, sometimes at times your health care.
You not only have information about voting in your precinct, how to register, other sorts of resources. It's a nonpartisan site. So, you're here to serve everyone, no matter where they fall on the political spectrum. But the other thing that I thought was nice is you have apparel, really sort of kind of giving us a team spirit feel about voting. You're wearing one of your t-shirts now.
I am. I'm going to stand up just a little so you all can see it. So this is one of the logos that was created for the t-shirt line. And the portion of the proceeds will go towards voter resources and educational. This is the first year of launching Protest to the Polls, but my ultimate goal was not to create an organization just for this political campaign. It was to actually continue it down the line. So this is my first year. I'm nervous, but I'm excited. It's been a great process, learning process, but we'll see where we go.
I want to thank you so much for being a griot. And just to help folks understand what a griot is, that term comes from West African culture. And these are people that use history and genealogy and storytelling to share their artistry. And so that's sort of the premise of the show. We ask guests to come on. Everyone has surprised me up until this point with their historical moment. And you talk to us about why you feel it's significant today and your takeaways and some action steps that people can take today. What is your historical moment?
My historical moment is actually not just a moment, but it's something that is continuous. And that will be the failure of passing the Paycheck Fairness Act that works to close the loopholes for women or for the Equal Pay Act of 1963 for women. And one of the reasons why that impacted me the most, because here in 2020, we are still underpaid and underrepresented. And I think that it is prominent during this time, not only because of COVID, because as we all know with COVID, women are bearing the brunt of a lot of things that are going on. They're the caretakers 90% of the time. They're also in the dominated fields that are being impacted the most, which is retail, hospitality, as well as education and healthcare. So for me, the data shows that there's currently an unequal pay for the inequality that's occurring for us. And you have to sit back and wonder, even with today's society, why is this still a problem in 2020? Like, why are women still underrepresented and underpaid? And why are people voting against this act?
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you raised that issue, and what an important one. There's so much data out there about pay disparities across genders. So what are your takeaways for folks and, or action steps?
I would say action steps and takeaways for me is to continue to push the envelope for women. For me, it is being the fact that we need more policies and rules that are in place for the option to have sick leave or the option for health care. And also to make it known and that you're okay to have that paid family leave. Because I think a lot of people are impacted because they're afraid to say, okay, well, I need time off to take care of my child, or I need time off to take care of my elderly parent. I think that also that more women need to speak up. I think that at times there's a lack of us because we don't want to push that envelope. I think that for us demanding that because we're afraid to, and we tend to go along with what society thinks is okay. So I think that more women should definitely speak up about their needs and their demands. Last but not least, also to take away from the cultural bias that's in place, especially when it comes down to women of color. Because I feel that for me, as we mentioned at the beginning of this interview, women are outnumbered in the field, and especially Black women when it comes down to the tech field and across the board. So I think that if that breakdown of cultural bias is removed, then I think that will be the first steps to get.
Nequella Battle, again, you have given us a lot to think about just in terms of equality across genders, as well as what it's like to be the only one in a certain space and how to continue to speak up and to feel confident about being heard. And so I'm always inspired by you, always. We're going to remind folks again to go to protesttopolls.org, right? And, check out the website, buy some voting gear. If you plan on standing in line, maybe you need a vote t-shirt like Nequella. If you're like me, you're going to put your ballot in the mail, and I might have a vote t-shirt on my way to the post office. Whatever works for you is what you can do. But Nequella Battle, thank you so much for being a Black woman in tech and a millennial on a mission. Thank you.
Yeah, I truly enjoyed myself.